So, for those in the class who have been at home for various reasons, or for those who have been in class and are going ahead and looking at this video anyways after the fact before they take their test, either way, here we go. We're just going to hit things up quick. You can look at these slides. They're going to be online, so you can view them at your leisure. I don't feel like we should go through all of them. We had a recap. We looked at the BC and before Common Era, the Dominant AD and Common Era. We just briefly retouched on that again. We discussed what it is to be a historian, why we look at history. We're wondering what matters, why does it matter, how do we know what happened, how can we interpret what happened, the cause and effect, those kind of things. We're just answering those history questions and asking those history questions. Starting the semester out, what we're going to be doing is looking at these things called river valley civilizations that are located in 4 key geographic areas. We are going to start out with Sumer, or the Mesopotamian river valley, and then we're going to look at Egypt, and then we're going to look at the Indus River Valley, and then later on, not during this particular period, we'll look at China. So this week is the River Valley civilizations, the start of this history as we know it, and we're going to be covering Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus River Valley. What are we looking at? Well, we're comparing. We're first starting off with what is the difference between a city and a settlement? What can we derive would be different from a city versus a settlement? Well, something we could look at, kind of starting off, would be something like the pyramids of Giza. Now, many people don't realize it is pyramids of Giza. So there's a city called Giza next door. I don't even see. Let's get rid of virtual tool in our search here. I want to see Giza. So yeah, here we go. We got the pyramids, and then over here we have some farmland that supports the cult that follows these emperors in the pyramids, which we're going to be learning about the pyramids and Egypt next week. But the point is that there was a city right there. This is modern times Giza. So this is Giza of today. Many people don't realize when you look at a picture of the pyramids that that's not going to come up big for me. You look at a picture of the pyramids, you're actually not getting this ugly view of Giza behind it. What I'm getting at, though, is that really civilization, looking at these river valley civilizations of Egypt and Sumeria and the Mesopotamia River Valley and the Indus River Valley, is that what makes them different than anyone else at the time is the fact that they develop into cities versus settlements. So settlements are, you got a collection of people, they found a reliable source of food, whether that's like crops that they can just grow on their own and they can harvest them, or maybe they are near a forest with a good plentiful amount of berries and game, so like deer or something like that. They can then make a permanent structure, a set of huts, if you will, out of clay, out of wood, straw and clay, and they live in these huts. And they might actually collect the huts close together, but that's as much as they do. They just live in the huts, and then they go kind of sort of farm that wheat or the barley or whatever grain might naturally grow right there, or they might even be kind of cultivating it themselves. They may actually take the time to carve up the soil and take the leftovers of the grain that they're eating and then spread it around to grow more. But that farming and that living in those huts is not a city, and it is not civilization. All that is just people living together and farming. What makes a city is that they have enough food and subsistence that they now can have specialized workers, right? And these specialized workers could be anything. They could be priests, they could be government officials, they could be soldiers for an army, they could be potters, like clay workers that make pottery, they could be carpenters to build things, they could be stonemasons, anything. In context of Atlanta as a city, your specialized workers would be rock stars or artists or the mayor, right? Specialized workers. They also have complex institutions that allow these specialized workers to have a place to work. And so these complex institutions create a long-lasting pattern of organization, i.e. a government or religious buildings. They also develop some sort of writing which allows record keeping for us to look back at and see that they are in fact a civilization and had these religions or governments because they needed some way to keep records, right? And that record is just the start of the advanced technology. We're going to look at all those things with this Sumerian Mesopotamian group. Now notice that Sumer here, or the Mesopotamian area, is in purple, right? So these purple slides are all having to do with Mesopotamia / the very first civilization as Sumeria. As historians, we were discussing last week how we looked at primary and secondary sources. A primary source, again, was one that came directly from the source of the history, and then secondary would be someone telling you about it, someone down the grapevine, a history book, right? Right here, we have this clay tablet remnant with the with this writing on it called cuneiform. It's triangles and lines. The cuneiform here is talking about the book of Jeremiah. It is the book of Jeremiah, written in cuneiform. Some 4,000 years ago is when this happened. Oh, wait. Actually, take that back. 6,000 years ago. Good Lord. So 6,000 years ago collected. This is 3,000 BCE, which, oh, that's 5,000 years. I can't do math. Anyways, long time ago, 5,000 years ago, guy carved this into this clay tablet, writing down the book of Jeremiah. It's in cuneiform. That's a direct source. Another one would be this Semitic script, which would be the Semitic is Semite or Jew. It's the Jewish script, in other words, or Hebrew. And it's written a long time ago about a battle between King David and the Arameans. He loses this battle. And this is a section right here. I think that they're trying to say that this says David. I'm not sure. But yeah, this little section is pulled out for some reason. But these are both direct sources, right? Another direct source would be this bronze sword that was dug up near the city of Ur outside of Babylon. In modern day Iraq, would be outside of Baghdad. It is or not out of Babylon, outside of Babylon, sorry. Outside of Baghdad in modern day Iraq. This bronze sword is from the Sumerians. It was, I saw it in the British Museum. This is me taking a picture here. This is an example of a primary source of what we know. They have bronze metallurgy or bronze working capability, so they can make bronze swords and bronze tools. Very, very important, because now we know that we're going from stone tools to the next metal up, which is bronze. And these swords were really neat. So you kept hearing me talk about Mesopotamia and the Sumerians, right? So Meso means in between. M-E-S-O is in between. Potamia means river. So Mesopotamia is in between the rivers. And what two rivers are we talking about? We're talking about the Tigris and Euphrates. The Tigris is the northernmost river, and the Euphrates is the southernmost river. So if you see this on a map, just always say Tigris and Euphrates. Remember, Tiger first, then Euphrates. So when you're trying to label these rivers, you know that the top river, the northern river, is the Tigris, and the southern river, or the bottom river, is the Euphrates. Now, why do I call it Mesopotamia or Sumer or Samaria? Because the Sumerians down here, well, it was purple, down here were the first to cultivate a civilization, or to start a civilization, to collectively put these cities together and govern them. They were then replaced by this green here, the Syrians or the Assyrians. And then later on they're replaced by the Babylonians. So you get this sequence of people governing the area of Mesopotamia, and they are the Sumerians first, the Assyrians second, and the Babylonians third. All of them are in the geographical area of Mesopotamia, and we call them the Mesopotamian River Valley Civilization, even though they're governed by 3 different empires. Now, Mesopotamia is the oldest known civilization in the world. It gets that title. It's not by much. Egypt's very close. So is the Indus River Valley. They all happen fairly close to each other, but Mesopotamia gets the credit for being the first, so it's the oldest. They are called the cradle of human civilization because it cradles like a baby and they started it, right? And we find a lot of writings about Mesopotamia in the Old Testament of the Bible, which just makes it older. I guess is the key part to that. We'll get to the building here in a minute. So this area, this geographic area, also gets the title the Fertile Crescent because it's this half-moon shaped geographic area. It's very fertile. You can grow plants there very easily. Some people would say in the Old Testament it's the real Garden of Eden. Like we said, it's in between these 2 rivers, the Tigris, Euphrates. It's a flat, very, very flat river valley area. So think flat, no mountains, not really any hills. Very flat, very fertile area in the river valleys themselves, surrounded by desert, and it was easily cultivatable, so it's easily for people to grow plants, right? However, these 2 rivers did have kind of a crazy flooding scheme. It wasn't predictable. It would just kind of happen here and there throughout the year. You knew that twice, if not more, the river would flood, but it was kind of unpredictable. It's in modern-day Iraq. We discussed that. The city of Baghdad is now the capital. So Babylon was here, and Ur is somewhere over in here, and there's Baghdad. We discussed how farming and agriculture was the key to this upspring of civilization. Because of them being able to farm easily, they could create a surplus in food, which allowed for an increase in population, right? And extra food means extra fat people, which means extra babies because there's food to feed them. In fact, there was so much food that people didn't have to really farm anymore, that you could have some people farming and some other people doing some other stuff. That leads to these social classes and government and specialized occupations of, like I said, people being like the mayor or a rock star or an artist, something like that. They don't gotta work every day to make food. Instead, they have time to paint pictures or to sing a song. In Samaria, when we talk about history and starting history and civilization, the main thing that they were able to do is start this form of writing, which is called cuneiform. One of the oldest forms of writing in the world. Cuneiform is how they document things. In this particular cuneiform clay tablet that's right here is the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a very old religious text from a king named Gilgamesh. It's a religious text. Really all you need to know is that this is cuneiform, and you need to know that this is a very old writing that we can actually, or an old epic or old story about heroes and things that we can read. It's in cuneiform. Cuneiform is a series of lines and wedges that's carved into a clay tablet. That's really all you need to know with that. Looking at this Fertile Crescent, you could see that since there is no mountains, that there is no stone, there's no bronze, there's no anything like that. They have to trade for all of that. We'll get into how they trade later. But what they're trading is actually clay. There's an abundance of clay. That's why they have the clay tablets. If you were to look at cuneiform writing, like say you get a PhD in ancient writing and you specialize in cuneiform, a lot of what you're going to be reading is the exchange of old wheats and barley to goats. That's what most of it's about. Most of it is about a trade between clay and bronze, wheat and goats, that kind of thing. It's pretty boring. It's not a lot to read. You're not going to get Hogwarts and Harry Potter out of cuneiform. However, there is large swaths of cuneiform writing that is still yet to be translated because it's not very interesting. But maybe inside that stuff, maybe someone will find another Gilgamesh. And, this is what it looks like if you were to write it down. Little triangles, lines. They're carved into things. No one actually wrote this lettering system down. And this is roughly translated into an alphabet to match today. Right here we have an excerpt from the Epic of Gilgamesh. Long story short, here we see lots of things we don't recognize when reading. We don't know what Ramparted Uruk is, or who Enkidu is, or anything like that. None of that really makes any sense to us, right? But what does ring a bell and actually does sound familiar? Maybe you're familiar with a harp and drums. Everybody knows what drums are. We know what a celebration is. We can kind of picture what holiday clothing would entail, even if it is in modern, thing. So we see that we do see some familiar things here. But basically, we know from reading this that cities at the time had a nightlife. They had parties and they had music, things like that. Here's some more cuneiform writing. You can see that how they translate here. That's just more examples of cuneiform writing. Here is a specialized building. Key part of a city is to have a specialized building. This is called a ziggurat. It is a temple or government building. It is terraced. Unlike pyramids, it has terraces. Here the Sumerians offered sacrifices. They are polytheistic. We'll get to that right here. So these Sumerians, these Babylonians, the Assyrians, Mesopotamians, they are polytheistic, meaning many gods. So they follow multiple different deities, gods, whatnot. And they're all elemental. That's a key thing here. Is that they're not just multiple of them. They're a reference to fire, lightning, ice, wind, earth, that kind of thing. Think Last Airbender kind of type stuff. They're polytheistic, so they have many of them, and they're elemental. I've said that multiple times, so if you're listening to this for the first time, it's very much important if I say something multiple times. Write it down. The ziggurats, cuneiform, polytheism, very important. So these temple priests controlled the earliest forms of government because, they're important because they're the ones who can talk to the gods, right? They're on the ziggurats. They also could read and write in cuneiform, so they had information that the low lay people, the not reading people, they didn't have that. An example that I gave to the class would be that if I was a priest, I could read, I know that tomorrow at midday there was going to be an eclipse of the sun, but you don't know that because you can't read. I come out to you and I say, hey, listen, if you don't pile up a bunch of gold in front of me, tomorrow the gods will blot out the sun and we will all starve to death. Tomorrow you're piling up the gold, suddenly the sun blots out. I'm like, oh, hey, that's enough gold. And then the sun unblots because the eclipse is done and it comes back. I'm like, see, I told you it's enough gold, you pleased me. And then now I have all the power, right? Because I can read. Okay. Something that happens out of this whole governance thing and being able to control people like that and get the gold or get the building materials so you can get them to build big and wonderful things. There's a story in the Old Testament as well as other places about a giant tower that's built called the Tower of Babel. Babylon, Babel. Or if you've maybe heard of a baby babbling on, that's kind of where this comes from. Supposedly way back when everybody had the same language and spoke the same, and they could all communicate together. And underneath this government, they all came together and decided that they were going to build a big tower to the gods. Or the god. Single god. It depends on who you're reading. Anyways, basically what happens is the god or gods swipe down the tower because they're like, oh, this is bad, you can't make it up to me, and they divide everyone up and make everyone speak a different language. It's an origin story as to why we all speak different languages. Another one that's interesting is the Hanging Guards of Babylon. Now this one actually, this can be proven to have existed. A better way of looking at it would be this. Let's see if we can get this to work. Yeah. So this is the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. It is the ziggurat style of the terraces, and we see some arches. Arches are super complicated. We'll talk about that more with the Romans as to how complicated the arches are. I'm not sure how the Babylonians conquered the idea, or not conquered, but developed the idea of building an arch, because it's not till the Romans that we see it perfected. So I don't know if it looked exactly like this or not. I've seen different depictions of this thing, but basically it is a botanical gardens, if you've ever been to that. It is a collection of a bunch of plants. Hammurabi, we'll look at him in a minute, is the king of Babylon, and he builds this for his wife to show how much he loves her. He collects animals and exotic plants and puts it in this for her. It's the Tower of, or the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Pretty interesting. I'm scrolling up and down instead of down. My mouse is broken. You need a new mouse? It's terrible. Alright, so economics. Well, because of this need for stone and for bronze and whatnot, the Babylonians, the Sumerians, the Mesopotamians, they trade their excess of food and their excess clay, because they have tons of clay, just tons and tons of it. They trade it for other resources such as bronze, stone, wood, that kind of thing. And it develops a huge trade network. In fact, the Sumerians actually develop an early sail and are capable of sailing, even though it isn't very far. Like we're talking like within the Persian Gulf sailing, or within maybe the Red Sea or the eastern part of the Med. They don't go far, okay? But they go far enough that they can do some coastal trading, right? And later years, this trading network is the start to developing other chunks of what's going to be called the Silk Road, which we're going to learn about. Silk Road's super important in the connection between East and West. Here we can see some technological advances and how we use that traded wood. The Sumerians are first to use the wheel. They invent the wheel. They just take big blocks of wood and they carve it into a circular structure. This right here is a chariot, not a Segway. Looks like a Segway, but it's a chariot. Here you have a cart, right? And something else that comes out of this is roads. We see some of the first roads develop because there are now wheeled carts with animals pulling them. It helps the military because of this chariot here. It also helps in farming. The big step here with the military and the chariot is because at this time, and 1,000 years plus after this, or more, well, actually, the wheel's invented in 6000 BCE. We use spears and shields all the way up into like the 1400s. So 7,500 years we fight with spears and shields. Not kidding. Oh my God, 7,000 years of spears. And that's, I mean, just the truth. Like everyone, 7,000 years using spears. You could try to name anybody you want. I'll argue with you to the day I die that the sword was not near as prevalent as the spear. But this chariot, here, this is what this does. So you get a line of guys, and you know what? Let's have some fun. Where's paint? Why not? I got time, because we're not in class. I can draw and have some fun. Well, let's see here. We got a formation of dudes. Make a little box like this, right? And then we got another formation of dudes. Make a box like that. And they face off to each other. And these guys got spears, and they're poking them out with their pokey thingies, like a porcupine. Other groups got their spears and they're poking them out like a porcupine, right? And these two formations, they meet and they clash in the middle and they poke at each other. That's how battle goes on for 7,000 years. We're going to talk about some variations and how things change throughout world history, but this is really the basis of it. But if I have my wheel, right? Wheel and my little chariot cart like this, and my horsey. There's my little horsey here, and see he's pulling me, right? And I'm able to go, and I don't know how to. If I'm able to like go like that, right? I'm able to like flank them, you know, and I can just keep going. Well, what are you going to do? You can't turn around and fight me because you can't move that formation fast enough. So see, I got a chariot. I can go out around. I can go towards and in the middle. I can go like this and curve out. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I could also go this way. Wait, nope, not that arrow. This one, yeah. I could also go that way, right? And nothing you can do about it because you're stuck in your formation. And the whole time, this guy is lobbing his own spears, right? Or maybe he's got a bow and arrow, or there are these guys called slingers. Let's look at slingers, because we can. No. Slinger, ancient weapon, ancient sling weapon, something. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, these things. So, you know, you get these guys. They're called slingers. They're quite effective. They last for quite some time. These guys could knock you off a horse. They'd knock you unconscious. I mean, it's a little rock, but it's going like 60 miles an hour. Or something. That's not really making that number up. It's somewhere in there. And, I mean, it pegs you in the head, and you're dead, right? The slinger's like one of the most accurate and deadly things on the ancient battlefield. So these guys are there. Hey, looky there. I would bet money that guy is Assyrian or Babylonian or something like that. They're Sumerian. I bet money. See, this guy's got a shield and a sling. Like, I'm not messing around with these dudes. Anyways, I digress. So, yeah, that's what the chariot did. Slingers are also there. You can have a slinger on the chariot. They're slinging at the little formation of dudes with spears. It's quite effective. You also can now haul your goods around. So now, like, I could like trade at a further distance with my grain instead of having to carry it on a basket. All right. Next thing that happens is after we get done with the Sumerians and then the Assyrians who use that chariot and go conquer people. Next, you get the Babylonians and Hammurabi. And Hammurabi decides, you know, we need a set of laws. So he has these columns made, and they're all over the place, and they have Hammurabi's law inscribed in them with cuneiform. I have this picture somewhere. I just got to find it. I've seen this thing in the British Museum. But yeah, Hammurabi's Code. We did a Hammurabi's Code exercise in class. Maybe we can upload that form or something to Canvas so those at home that can't be there can look at it. Basically, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Example being, if I am in ancient Babylonia and I decide that I want to steal my neighbor's TV, yeah, we're in ancient Babylonia, but we got large, he's got like a, we'll say, actually my neighbor does. He has like a 90-inch TV. I didn't even know that. That's like, it's like home cinema size. Like, it's massive. So if I wanted to go to my neighbor, Mr. Arvin, and I wanted to steal his big TV, that's cool and all, but if I had to break down the door to do it, the way Hammurabi's Code works, not only am I liable for that TV, but I'm also liable for the broken door, and I can be poked with a spear and hung inside the door and killed basically for stealing his TV. And I gotta give the TV back. Say no one can find me because I escape town and I go to Guatemala with his 90-inch TV to go live out the rest of my days in a hut somewhere watching, satellite television. The city will then have to, according to Hammurabi's Code, replace that 90-inch TV and fix the door. This also caused it where local municipalities or local cities, local governance, they would be very stern about policing and making sure people didn't get things stolen because they didn't want to be liable for the things stolen. Hammurabi's code was very influential, still influential today. So he rules the area from 1792 BCE, now before Common Era, to 1750. We started out around 3000 BCE when we talked about the Sumerians, and now we're about 1.5 millennia later, right? So he consolidates existing laws to create his first written one. The punishments are based on the crime. Social class could determine the severity of the punishment, and the peasants and the upper class receive different punishments. It's there. We want to keep in track that Mesopotamia is patriarchal. It's male-dominated. Women and children could be sold for debts, and women were protected by Hammurabi's code, so were children. Okay, so we're going to skip this slide for a second and look at Ur. Ur is the capital city of ancient Mesopotamia. Later on, it moves to Babylonia. These last little bit here we're going to cover is these people called the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians are important because they spread ideas and Greek culture, or early Greek culture, along a large area of the Mediterranean. Okay, they settled cities all over. I wish that I had this up while I was at school, but teaching. But yeah, they start off in like areas like Cyprus and Sicily. We'll look at these guys with the Greeks, but I just want you to be introduced to them. And they settle cities all along this sea called the Mediterranean Sea. Very crucial. You need to know the Mediterranean Sea. The Med is super important to the next 2 or 3 weeks. So yeah, Mesopotamia. So you got your Tigris, remember, northern Euphrates, located right here. It's located in between the Mediterranean, the Persian Gulf, and then here's the Red Sea. That's where it's located. And all of this area right here is the Phoenician civilization. Let's see how they end up intersecting because they get close. Okay, so let's look on to something to come out of the Mesopotamian area, the Tigris and the Euphrates, would be the idea of monotheism. It comes to us in two forms. It comes to us through Zoroastrianism, and it comes to us through the Hebrew tradition of Judaism, right? And the Torah is the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. It's also the Old Testament. There's a guy named Abraham in there. He's the father of all Hebrews, and he's also the beginning of 3 major religions that trace their way back to it. They're called the Abrahamic traditions. They're traced through his sons Isaac and Ishmael. Those 3 traditions are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. We're going to look at all of those. The area in between the Dead Sea and the Mediterranean right here is called the area of Canaan, which is ancient Hebrews' homeland. They leave that area for a little while and go to Egypt, then come back. It's promised to them by God through a covenant. A covenant is a promise between God and the Hebrews, or God and anyone. Someone who takes them out of Egypt, we'll find out, is this guy named Moses. He does this during what's called the Exodus, or the departure from Egypt, and he, in a place called Mount Sinai, on the Sinai Peninsula. You can't see my cursor, but it's in between the Nile River and the Dead Sea. Yeah, he gives the 10 Commandments. We'll come back to all that later. So ancient Egypt is the next place we'll be moving on to tomorrow. I don't feel like recording it right now, so I'll record it tomorrow. If you have any questions, email Miss Hicks or myself. Have a wonderful time. Test is on Friday. I'll come back to you with Egypt tomorrow. No, I don't want to take a screenshot. I want to... Oh, God. Where'd it go? Did it stop? Nope.